Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of the Middle Order Cricket Podcast. I'm joined by one of our regulars, Khizar Ali, and our new member of the panel, Azam Iqbal. Everybody's been waiting to see Azam on the panel for some time. Say hello, Azam.
Hello to everyone.
Right, Azam. So this one is a special episode for you. You've always wanted to discuss Babar Azam as a batsman. Of late, a lot of Pakistani fans would include Babar Azam in amongst that 4 or 5 top batsmen in the world. But you believe that Babar Azam hasn't yet reached that level.
Yeah, for me, he's got a long way to go to get there. And I think a lot of Pakistani fans, to me, are a bit kind of illusionized when it comes to Babar Azam. I think they're trying to put him into a bracket where I feel he can get to, where he's got the potential to get to, the talent to get to. But I think, looking at it myself, he's quite a long way off that bracket just yet. And I think it's a wee bit unfair to kind of even put him in that bracket. I think it's putting extra pressure on him, pressure that he doesn't need at this moment in time. I think people forget he's still relatively young. He's only 26-year old, so he is kind of like a baby when it comes to batting. He's still kind of getting to know his game, and I'm just going to build on what Khizar said earlier. And he goes, we need to kind of look at the stats. And I'm not denying that he has a great average. I'll just start off with the one-dayers. So I was looking at this a couple of days ago. And the reason why I really wanted to dig into these stats is because everyone says, okay, but look at his average, look at his average, look at his average. And so I kind of went in and I looked at kind of the scores and kind of the impacts his scores have had on games. So the thing I went into was 12 centuries. And obviously 12 centuries in 75 games, I would say that is a pretty good record. But then when you go into them and you kind of analyse who these centuries have came against, I think his record is a wee bit less impressive. And so I was looking, he has 9 centuries against West Indies, Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe. So 9 out of the 12 centuries are against these teams. I think the first 3 centuries were against West Indies, and I think they were really good. That's when he kind of burst onto the scene. But after that, he's not kind of made those centuries that have made me sit up and take notice. I'm going to talk about the other 3 centuries. The one that was really impressive for me was the one against New Zealand in the World Cup. I think there was a lot of pressure on him to perform, and he came out, he performed, and he did what was asked of him. And I think everyone was chuffed to bits. But looking at the other 2 centuries, one was against Australia, and I think he made one just over 100. But Pakistan lost that game quite convincingly, and I thought his strike rate was well below what it should have been. He got to 100, he didn't kick on, and his strike rate was below 100. So then just building on that, I looked at his other innings against England. Again, same situation. He scored 100. I think Pakistan were chasing 362, and he was batting at a strike rate of 91. And again, I felt that that's nowhere near what's expected of someone that we're trying to put in the bracket of the Fab Four. So I feel
so Khizar, let's focus just on the ODI career that Babar Azam has had just now. Azam said 77 games. He's averaging 55, 56. He's 12 centuries and 16 50s. So Azam's argument is that he scored runs, but he scored them against weak opposition, or he scored them in games where Pakistan didn't have a chance anyway.
Yeah. So look, you can only play what's in front of you, and I think a lot of it, they're talking about this Fab Four. And we've got, pundits, commentators out there and saying like Babar Azam has now to be considered as part of this Fab Four. First of all, who decided it had to be 4? Where did that come from? 4? Why not 3? And if we're going to put a guy in, why don't we change it to 5? Why the hell are we limiting ourselves to 4 when who decided 4? And then we're kicking Joe Root out because we're saying he's not up to it. Form's going to come into it. These guys have got phenomenal numbers. Babar Azam, since the departure of Yunus Khan, Misbah to some extent, but a lot of others as well. We've had Fidigo, we've had a lot of people go, and we've got a very young team. As you mentioned, Azam, these other guys who are going through a transitional phase, so are Pakistan. They're in the same boat. We've got a young guy who I think everyone who watches Babar Azam says, love watching this guy play. And that's where it comes from. I think that's where the guys are saying, look, this guy looks too good. He's got to be a part of these top 4 that we're considering. But then the people are going to drop in and out of form as well. And that's what happened. We said, right, he's in there, Joe Root's out now, but Joe Root's had phenomenal couple of months now. So does that mean he's back and we're kicking somebody else out? You can only play who's in front of you. His ODI record is good. He's made centuries maybe in games where you could say there wasn't that impact because of his strike rate. He's not that kind of player. And I know Waqas, you said we're going to look at his ODI form here, but we're talking about including a guy in a set of generational players, and we've got to look at all formats. And he's a test of late, but he's performing across all formats. And in the ODIs, he's consistent. In T20s, he was consistent. There was a question mark over him for tests. But as far as ODIs are concerned, he's carrying that team on his shoulders. He's making the runs. He might not be doing it at the strike rate of, some of the bigger hitters, but that's not who he is.
Well, I've selected a 3-year period for top world-class batsmen. So if I give you the averages and the stats for each of the forms of the game, just give me a comment on what you think. So test match wise, if we take the 3 years and look at the average of some of the top batsmen, and I'm just looking at the top maybe 10, for example, and the year Babar Azam's average is 58 in 20 matches over that 3-year period. That average compares to Kane Williamson, who's got 68 over that same period, Marnus Labuschagne 61, and then we look at the other big 4. So Joe Root actually only averages 45 over that 3-year period, and we've got Virat Kohli, who's actually averaging only 52 relative to Babar Azam. So quite a significant gap between Babar Azam and those 2 that I've mentioned. In the ODI arena, we've got Babar Azam actually averaging 62 over the last 3 years. And again, that compares very favourably to Root, who's averaging 48. Williamson, I don't have as one of the top run scorers in ODI cricket over that period. And we talk about his strike rate, Azam. So this might surprise you a little, but he's batted at a strike rate of, say, 92 over those 3 years, whereas Rohit Sharma, who's averaging 67, is batting at a strike rate of 95. So it's really small gap there, Azam. What do you have to say to that? He's actually batting very similar level to Rohit Sharma.
Hondas.
I think that's a good point. But again, I don't. This is what I'm getting with Pakistani fans. You just went to the average. You looked at the average, and that was it. But what I'd come back.
He looked at the strike rate as well. He looked at the strike rate.
I'm going to go into the strike rate. But if you went into Rohit Sharma's strike rate, where every single time he's made 100, you would expect to see that strike rate over 100. I think.
Listen, mate, you're now being selective. You're saying when he's been successful, he's done well. Obviously, he has, but that's where averages and strike rates come in. You look at the times that you've not made hundreds as well. When you made 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it all counts. And Rohit Sharma's in a team with the rest of these, whatever you call them. I can't say the word on YouTube, but what I think. But the rest of those guys,
you're not getting the point. If he's making 100, he should be kicking on. He should be then kicking on, making 130, 140. His strike rate shouldn't be 92. Look, it shouldn't be 93 like it is right now. He should be finishing strike rate over 100.
That's what end of the day. I think you're being selective. You're taking numbers and you're saying, right, Rohit Sharma's strike rate is higher when he kicks on. Waqas has told you over a 3-year period, this guy has got a better average or a similar average, similar strike rate to Rohit Sharma, who's one of the top ODI players. I would still look at Rohit Sharma as a top player. He scores big hundreds. He scores double tons. But this is a guy, Rohit Sharma's there in ODIs. He's not there in tests. And we've got a player who's performing in all 3 formats. Not just the one. I know we're talking about ODIs or we're talking about tests, but this guy's doing it across all 3. We're not going to know where this guy stands until all of these guys until their careers are over.
So why don't we just look at T20 very quickly? So over the last 3 years, he is the top run scorer in the world. He's averaging 48, and he's got a strike rate of 134. And if I compare that to, let's say, Virat Kohli, who's scored, 200 runs less in similar number of games, although a few less innings, he's averaging 46, an average of 139. So again, not a massive difference there. But Rohit Sharma, who
I just want you
come back to
wait. I just want you to jump in there.
Does.
Just want you to jump in there, basically, with what Gus was saying. So I was looking at his T20 record as well, Babar Azam's, and I agree it is very impressive. But the difference I'm finding, and this is not just specific to Babar Azam, but it's just the Pakistan team in general. So I was just looking at the kind of last 4 or 5 series they've played. But it seems like when Pakistan go out and they play against now these teams, these nations, they're not putting out the strongest teams against us compared to like 10 years ago when we were the kind of number 1 team in the world. Everyone wanted to play us.
We are the number 1 T20 team. We're first to win 100 games, Azam. Credit where it's due.
Credit where it's due, but now we're going up against these teams. They're putting out the B teams. They're putting out the C teams. They're not putting out.
What can you do about that?
They're not putting out the. So what I'm saying is, when Waqas is
I come to your house. Do I get samosa? I don't get samosa every time. It's all depending on what you put out. If you give me fucking a couple of chocolates and a bloody cheese and onion pasty, that's all I can eat.
Yeah, but listen. So if we want to kind of compare him to Virat Kohli. When Virat Kohli comes, he's playing against the A-team sides. He's playing against the best of the best. When Pakistan go and tour a nation, they're not playing against the best teams. They're not playing against the best England team, the best New Zealand team. Okay, I think with South Africa, if it wasn't down to the Australia situation, they would have put their best team out. So I think it'll be very, very interesting when Babar Azam goes to South Africa and he will be facing the best South Africa team there to see how he gets on. Because I think
he's been to South Africa and he ripped staying apart. Do you not remember what happened there?
He went to South Africa, but Steyn was on the decline. I think nobody will deny.
Let's get back on track, boys. Let's get back on track. Well, we can talk about South Africa another time, but I just want to point out a couple of things, Khizar. So, I mean, I think Azam's got a valid point in that Babar Azam, he bats quite traditionally, so he scores maybe at a lower strike rate than some of the best T20 ODI players in terms of at least speed. An example of that, for example, here is he's scored over 3 years. He scored 16 sixes. If I compare that to a Rohit Sharma, he's got 60 over that same period. Even somebody like Shikhar Dhawan, who's got 35. Aaron Finch, 47.
But taking that, you've got to look at those figures along with what their strike rate was. So how does the strike rate compare between
strike rates are very similar? Strike rates are very similar with some, with maybe a little bit higher for Rohit Sharma and Finch. Actually, Finch is significantly higher at 160. Rohit Sharma 145 compared to Babar Azam's 135. But though I say he's got scored less sixes in the fours category, he's scored more fours over that period than anybody else.
So, okay, now look at it this way. We were talking about this conversation was about Babar Azam in the Fab Four. We are comparing him to Rohit Sharma, who is not in the Fab Four. We're comparing him to Finch, who is not in the Fab Four. What my point is, this guy is a consistent performer across all 3 formats, and he should be considered as one of the best in the world. This guy could potentially go on to be Pakistan's best batsman ever, but you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know, decline in form, anything could happen. So I will wait till he hangs up his boots. But this guy is a class player, and he looks good. I mean, you look at somebody like Steve Smith, who's got the numbers, maybe not the best technique, or I just shouldn't say the best technique. Maybe he's not got textbook technique, but this guy looks good. He's performing, and we need to back him. We need to back him because he's the best we've got, and he should be considered amongst the best of his generation.
Would you say right now then, in test matches, he's as good as the other 4? Would you put him, if you were selecting, let's say you're selecting 5 or 4 players today, right? I give you 5 of those players. Would you select Babar Azam in there?
So I'm going to go back to my point. I said in tests, he is still making a name for himself because he's new to the game, as you mentioned, Azam.
Yeah.
Secondly, when we're talking about the Fab Four, we're not only talking about one format. And my thing is the test arena is where, I mean, his average is still brilliant in the
if
test
we actually
game,
just let's just look at the test figures very quickly.
Yeah.
So I know we're talking about Fab Four. So Joe Root averaging 45 over the last 3 years. We've got Virat Kohli averaging 52 over the last 3 years. Kane Williamson outstrips them all, 68, and Steve Smith as 55. Care to guess what Babar Azam's average is over that same period, Azam?
If I had to take a guess, I'd say about 47.
It's 58 over that 3-year period.
Honda.
So he's better than Joe Root, better than Virat Kohli, and better than Steve Smith with Williamson.
We all know he's better than Virat Kohli.
I'm going to disagree with Khizar on that one. So that's
tongue in cheek, right?
To be honest,
Virat Kohli is a class player, right? That's bit of a laugh, whatever you want to call it. This guy's got the numbers. If we take away the last couple of months with Joe Root, what he's done in Sri Lanka, what he did at the start in India, would the two of you not say Babar Azam gets into a World Test 11 before Joe Root?
Yep, in my opinion.
Personally, I mean,
yes.
No, and I'll tell you why. I think Joe Root's...
It's because you're full of shit. That's why, Azam.
Joe Root's been...
How can you... You've got numbers. You've given numbers.
He's been... Okay, look, listen. Okay, he's picking on a number, right? Listen to my numbers and listen to context, right? So Joe Root's been everywhere, done it, scored centuries everywhere. Babar Azam has 1 test century away from home. 1 test century away from home. Because the other 4 centuries basically have been at home, and I think they've been against Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And I think I might be right in saying he did get one at home against New Zealand, but I'll just have to double check that. So for me, I would take a player over that's done it everywhere over a player that's only scored 1 century away from home.
Okay.
Because we're comparing there a person who's played 30 games in Babar Azam versus Joe Root, who's played a significant number.
I agree with you. Look, his numbers in terms of he can only do what he's been asked to do, right? So he's new as far as the test game is concerned. Is relatively new, but for me, if I was picking a World 11, like I said, the last 2 months, Joe Root's been awesome. Before that, I would have had Babar Azam in the team. I would have, because I would have, if you were saying, right, pick a team, you don't pick a team on how many, on experience or that. If I've got Steve Smith in my team, if I've got Virat Kohli in my team, and if I've got Williamson in my team, I would add Babar Azam before Joe Root to that. Nothing against Joe Root. And Joe Root's, you can compare Joe Root and Babar Azam a lot in that respect, because Joe Root had a lot of question marks in terms of T20s and limited over game. Is he suited to it? Is he the right kind of batsman for it? So I think he's got the same kind of question marks hanging over him that Babar Azam has. They're quality players. They've both of them have proved that they deserve to be in all 3 formats. And for me, like I said, we need to compare it at the end of the careers. And I don't know where this 4's come from. 3 would make sense. If you're going to add a guy, then there's 5. We've got 5 quality batsmen. You don't need to kick one out to accommodate another.
Yep. And one thing I would say, Khizar, is do you think he lacks a little bit of stature in terms of, when these top teams come and play Pakistan? Do you think they're really concerned about Babar Azam yet, or is he getting to that stage where somebody like a Steve Smith, Virat Kohli, he's in their mind at all times? Is Babar Azam there yet?
No, I'll be straight. I don't think he is there yet, but he is got all the ingredients to be there. He's not the Virat Kohli type of player who's going to be in your face. He's not got that persona that Steve Smith has got. If anything, he's very similar to Root and Williamson in that regard. That he plays inside, he plays within himself. He's a subdued type of character. But that do the opposition feel a little any easier? No, I think any time anybody is about to play Pakistan and they talk about batsmen, he's the first one that they talk about. The big bowlers, their plans against him. He's the wicket that people want. There's something else we need to talk about, which is that we've said he is the youngest of this group. He's played the least number of games out of the guys that we're comparing him to, but he's been given the burden of captaincy as well. This was his first real series as Test captain, and we won the Test series. But I think this is another aspect which we really need to consider: how much of this burden is going to affect his batting, and that we'll only be able to tell after a few years. The PCB have said, look, this is long term. He knows that's his job. He's been given the confidence because he's been allowed to pick his own team going into games, which is a big plus as well, because generally a Pakistan coach does have a lot of influence over that, not maybe going back all the way to Imran Khan times, but recently the coach does have a lot of influence. So I think that's going to be something that will affect his batting. We'll only see. Time will tell, I guess.
Yep, and when as captain, it's not just the challenge of the pressure, but it's also the preparation. How much time do you have to spend on just focusing on your own batting rather than preparing things for the team, the strategy, watching other teams play? So perhaps that was an issue in this series where he was getting out. Even in the T20 series, he got out in a very similar fashion to previously, where he's planted his foot. And maybe that's an issue where he's not been able to go back and rectify an issue in training because he's been busy as a captain. Azam, do you think he's under significant pressure as a captain? Do you think his form is going to struggle as a result?
I think it's too early to say if his form's going to struggle. I think he did. I think he made 77 and 33, and I think he looked really in good touch in both innings. I think I would say, well, he didn't look out of form. He was timing everything well. I felt pretty confident when he was at the crease, when he was batting. I think his cover drive was as good as ever. I just think it was something against Maharaj. And I was talking to someone else just obviously outside the group, and they were saying that Kevin Peterson had similar issues against left-arm spinners. So they were like, maybe it could be the same issue. Maybe that's someone he could turn to and speak to if this is a long-term issue. But again, I'm not going to lie, when in the T20s the left-arm spinners did come on, I was pretty worried. But I think he did play them quite comfortably. But in relation to your question, no, I'm not worried what the captaincy will do in relation to his batting. I think it's too early to say. But I think I'm a wee bit concerned with some of the other decisions he's made at captaincy. But I'm sure you'll look into that in a bit more detail down the line.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I just want to leave you with one stat. Azam's especially combined record over the last 3 years. Nobody who's made any significant runs has scored at a better average than Babar Azam, who did that at 56. Everyone else has been below that level. So
Hondas.
We can pick this up maybe in a year's time and see if Azam or Khizar were
right. In 5 years' time.
In 5 years' time, we can pick this up and see if Babar Azam is truly one of the best of all time. But yes, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll catch up later.